Between February 2024 and February 2025, something extraordinary happened in corporate America. Not in a boardroom, not in a press conference, not even in a leaked memo that went viral. The word day just vanished. Use of the acronym DAY dropped by 68% among S&P 500 companies compared to 2024, 68% in 1 year. That's not a trend, that's a mass evacuation. Now, if you think this is just about 3 letters disappearing from annual reports, you've been paying attention to the wrong story. Because while you were arguing on Twitter about whether day is woke or wonderful, 53% of the S&P 100 adjusted their day messaging in major filings in 2025. More than half of the 100 biggest publicly traded companies in America, and here's the kicker that nobody's talking about. The share of S&P 500 companies reporting the use of day metrics in executive pay fell from 68% in 2024 to 35% in 2025. Translation: if your CEO was getting bonuses for diversity last year, there's a 50/50th chance they're not anymore. The money moved, the incentives changed, and nobody sent you a memo. This isn't a story about politics. This isn't even really about diversity. This is a story about the fastest corporate U-turn in modern history and the data that proves it happened while you were UNT looking. Let's start with what actually disappeared. Because when I say day is dead, I don't mean dead. I mean ninja level stealth dead. Gone dash, from dash, the dash website, dash, but dash, still dash, happening dash, maybe dead. Here's what we know from actual SEC filings, the ones companies legally have to file, the ones they can't just scrub from their websites when the political winds shift. From 2024 to 2025, the share of S&P 500 companies disclosing data on women in management fell by 16%. Disclosure on gender and racial diversity of board directors fell by 28% and 31% respectively. Let that sink in. Nearly 1/3 of companies just stopped telling you about board diversity. Not because their boards got more diverse, not because their boards got less diverse, they just decided you don't get to know anymore. But it gets better or worse, depending on your perspective. Firms with no disclosure on board gender diversity jumped from 1% in 2024 to 29% in 2025, from 1% to 29% in 1 year. That's not a gradual shift, that's a coordinated retreat. And if you think annual reports are boring, wait until you hear about proxy statements. In 2024, approximately 49% of the Fortune 100 had a mini-day report about their diversity-related initiatives in the proxy statement. In 2025, only 21% of the Fortune 100 retained this disclosure, with 28% of the Fortune 100 removing this disclosure from the proxy statement entirely. That's 28 companies, more than a quarter of the Fortune 100, that went from our detailed day report to radio silence. Now, some corporate spokesperson somewhere is probably preparing to tell me, we're not abandoning day, we're reframing it. We're embedding it into broader human capital strategies. Sure you are, just like cigarette companies reframe smoking as a personal choice issue. See, this is where it gets deliciously Orwellian, because these companies didn't just cut programs, they rebranded them. It's not lying if you just change the words, right? Take Bank of America, please. Take them. Bank of America's 2025 report contains 0 mentions of diversity relating to employment initiatives compared to 12 references to the company's diversity efforts. In last year's report, 0. From 12 to 0. It's like diversity ghosted them on WhatsApp, but don't worry, they replaced it with something much better. Where the diversity and inclusion section in Bank of America, S10K was last year, is instead a section in this year's filing titled Talent, Inclusion, and Opportunity. Talent, Inclusion, Opportunity. Notice what's missing: the D for diversity and the E for equity. It's like they replaying corporate Wheel of Fortune and someone bought all the consonants except the ones that matter. Oh, and that's not all. A table breaking down workforce demographics called diversity metrics in last year's filing is referred to as workforce data. In this year, same data, different name, it's the corporate equivalent of your teenager, saying they not grounded, they just experiencing extended home time. And Buffet isn't alone. More than a third of S&P 100 companies have stopped using the term equity altogether. Equity, the middle word, the one that means actually trying to level the playing field instead of just hoping things work out. Gone. Because here's the thing. Even if some companies are continuing their diversity and equity efforts, they're less likely to trumpet that on their 1K form. Translation, we might still be doing the thing, but we're definitely not telling you we're doing the thing. Because telling you we're doing the thing is apparently more dangerous than not doing the thing. Now let's talk about Google, because if anyone was supposed to be immune to this, it was them. Google, which first released diversity data in 2014 after pressure from civil rights groups, helped set the standard for day reporting. They were pioneers, transparent, data, all those things tech companies love to claim they are. And then, February 2025, an email from Google's chief people officer drops. Google's parent company, Alphabet, removed language stating its commitment to day in its annual report to the Securities and Exchange Commission. Google said it will no longer use hiring targets to improve representation among its employees. Remember, in 2020, Google joined a wave of companies to implement day measures in the wake of the murder of George Floyd. Setting a target to increase the proportion of leadership representation of underrepresented groups by 30% before 2025, they hit that target in 2023. Pat on the back, mission accomplished, right? Wrong. Because in 2025, they decided that having goals was the problem. Google Chief People Officer Fiona Chacon told employees that because we are a federal contractor, our teams are also evaluating changes to our programs required to comply with recent court decisions and U.S. executive orders on this topic. We'll continue to invest in states across the U.S. and in many countries globally, but in the future we will no longer have aspirational goals. No more aspirational goals. That's corporate speak for we're done trying. Oh, and it gets better. Google also amended its diversity website in the past week, including changing a top executive's position from Chief Diversity Officer to VP, People Operations. Same person, different title, because Chief Diversity Officer apparently became as politically toxic as Director of Controversial Opinions. But wait, there's more. Google has purged more than 50 organizations related to diversity, equity, and inclusion from a list of organizations that the tech company provides funding to. The company has removed a total of 214 groups from its funding list, while adding 158 derelated groups. Gone, defunded, ghosted, and here's the beautiful irony. Google and Meta confirmed they will not publish diversity, equity, and inclusion data this year, a notable reversal from years of public reporting. The companies that built their empires on data transparency decided that this particular data is too transparent. But here's where this story stops being about language and starts being about money. Okay, so companies changed their language. Boring corporate stuff, right? Who cares about a few words in an SEC filing? Wrong, because here's what nobody's telling you. The words changed because the money changed. In recent years, some U.S. public companies have linked executive compensation to derelated goals. In 2024, 68% of S&P 500 companies and 41.6% of Russell 3000 companies disclosed in their annual reports that they linked these metrics. In 2025, this figure dropped to 35.3% for S&P 500 companies and 18.7% for Russell 3000 companies. Read that again, 68% to 35%. That's not a minor adjustment, that's cutting it in half. Translation. Last year, if you were a CEO at a Fortune 500 company, there was a good chance part of your bonus depended on hitting diversity goals. This year, coin flip. And when you remove financial incentives for doing something, guess what happens? Spoiler alert, companies stop doing it. In 2024, almost 60% of the Fortune 100 disclosed in the proxy statement that day-related metrics were used to determine executive compensation, including short and long-term incentive awards and cash bonuses. In 2025, 30% of the Fortune 100 removed or replaced these day-related executive compensation metrics. 30%? Gone. Replaced with what? Where day-related metrics were replaced, companies were using other human capital metrics, such as employee engagement scores or employee safety metrics. Employee engagement scores. That's code for, we asked people if they're happy in a survey. Employee safety metrics. That's actually good. but also not the same as diversity goals. Here's the thing. When hitting a diversity target was worth 10% of your multi-million-dollar bonus, you cared about diversity. When it's not, you've got other priorities. So who exactly joined this exodus? Because it wasn't just Google and Bank of America playing musical chairs with their commitment to inclusion. Let's run through the greatest hits or greatest quits, depending on your perspective. Target. Target has cut funding for its day programs and has ceased tracking diversity metrics. Day-focused leadership positions within the company have also been eliminated. Meta, after Mark Zuckerberg, decided they needed a productive partnership with the incoming administration. Subtle. Amazon. The company has reduced its commitments to supplier diversity and has scaled back its day reporting processes. While not making a public announcement, internal changes have been observed. BlackRock, the financial giant, has pulled back from its aggressive day hiring programs. Investor pressure to focus on profitability over social initiatives has played a role in this shift. Citigroup has withdrawn from certain external day reporting programs. The financial services firm has removed its board diversity requirements, and these are just the big names, the ones that made headlines. A July 23 report by Resume.org reported that 20% of companies have scrapped their day programs since Trump's re-election. 1 in 5, poof, gone. Oh, and Microsoft, they weren't immune either. Microsoft reduced day section size by 76% between 2023 to 2024, cutting identity group references. 76%? That's not a trim, that's a buzzcat. Now, whenever I present this data, someone always asks, but why? Why now? What changed? And the official corporate answer is always the same. Evolving legal landscape. Recent court decisions, executive orders, compliance requirements, it's like they all got the same memo. Oh wait, they probably did. Here's the timeline they want you to focus on. After President Donald Trump's re-election, McDonald's, Meta, a few banks, and others preemptively adjusted policies in anticipation of backlash. When a January 2025 executive order directed heads of agencies to target private sector DEI, another wave of major companies, including Target, BlackRock, and even law firms, dropped their day goals. Notice the language, preemptively adjusted. That S-corporate speak for we saw which way the wind was blowing and decided to abandon ship before we were asked to. The phenomenon has picked up the pace since the election of Donald Trump, who signed an executive order after taking office, eliminating day preferencing in federal contracting, and required contractors to affirm that they will not engage in illegal discrimination, including illegal day. And suddenly, every company that's ever done business with the government went day. Never heard of her. The phenomenon began following a Supreme Court ruling that struck down Harvard's use of race-based affirmative action criteria in college admissions, and led to increased scrutiny over the legality of key aspects of corporate day policies. That was 2023. The Supreme Court ruled on college admissions, not corporate hiring, not workplace diversity initiatives. College admissions. And yet, corporate America treated it like a fire alarm. So here's the part where I'm supposed to tell you this is all about legal compliance, right? Companies are just being careful, following the law, doing the responsible thing. Except, while hiring decisions based solely on race or gender remain illegal under the Civil Rights Act, companies have typically described their diversity initiatives as aspirational efforts to widen candidate pools. Aspirational efforts to widen candidate pools, that's been legal this entire time. That's still legal now. Nothing changed. So what's really happening? Let me quote the experts. This shift in public disclosure does UNT signal companies are abandoning Rather, they're selectively reframing commitments, reducing public exposure, and embedding oversight more quietly, yet firmly into governance and human capital management. Translation: we're still doing it, we're just not telling you we're doing it. Because admitting we're doing it has become politically inconvenient. Or, as one HR Policy Association executive put it, if in the current environment, it's something that could actually wind up harming the company or putting a target on their back or triggering political consequences that are not in line with what the actual goal is, they just won't use that disclosure. In today's environment, VA just found the most effective way to continue this work on a legal basis is by doing it quietly. Doing it quietly. Let that phrase marinate. These companies aren't stopping, they're just hiding. It's the corporate equivalent of your teenager saying, "I'm not vaping." Mom, while Instagram stories tell a different story, and the reason they're hiding. After President Donald Trump's re-election, companies preemptively adjusted policies in anticipation of backlash. Anticipation, not actual lawsuits, not actual government action. Anticipation. They're playing defense against a threat that hasn't even materialized yet, which tells you everything about what they really value. Profit over principle, political safety over social progress. But here's where this story gets really interesting. Because while these companies were busy rebranding and retreating, something unexpected happened. So companies cut day, saved themselves some political headaches, made conservative activists happy. End of story, right? Wrong, dead wrong. Because while executives were patting themselves on the back for their savvy political maneuvering, something was happening on the ground floor. 2 in 3 business leaders say their companies suffered consequences after cutting day, including boycotts and diminished morale. 2 in 3. That's not a fringe response. That's a majority of companies facing actual, measurable consequences. The remaining 2/3 reported various negative outcomes, including a decline in employee morale, 37%, increased internal conflict or division, 33%, and difficulties attracting diverse talent, 33%. Additional consequences include damage to brand perception, 27%, loss of customers or partners, 18%, negative media coverage, 16%, and boycotts, 9%. Let's unpack that. 37% saw morale crash. 33% saw workplace conflict spike. 33% found it harder to hire diverse candidates. Turns out, when you tell employees, "We don't care about this anymore," they hear it loud and clear. "Take Target, please. Take them." Protesters gathered outside Target's Minneapolis headquarters, and a 40-day consumer boycott was organized by civil rights groups. Store traffic fell 7.9% year-over-year in Q1 2025. And internal sources reported increased turnover among employee resource group leaders and day staff. Store traffic down 8%. That's not a rounding error. That's real people voting with their feet. The company's CEO, Brian Cornell, reportedly took a nearly 50% pay cut as investor confidence slipped and public scrutiny mounted. Half his pay gone. Because turns out, alienating your customer base has consequences. Who knew? But the real damage that's happening inside these companies, where the cameras aren't rolling. Only 5% of employees believe days should be scaled back. 69% fear that corporate day rollbacks will trigger industry-wide cutbacks. 65% say reducing day efforts will significantly harm employee retention. 64% believe workplace morale will suffer with day cuts. Read those numbers again. 95% of employees think cutting day was a bad idea. 95%. You can't get 95% of employees to agree on what day Christmas falls on, but they agree on this. And it's not just feelings. Of those that scaled back or cut DEI altogether, 57% report hiring fewer underrepresented workers. More specifically, 37% say hiring of women of color has declined, along with 33% who report fewer LGBTQIA+ hires, 33% who report fewer men of color being hired, and 26% who say hiring of people with disabilities has declined. So, let me get this straight. Companies said we're not abandoning DEI, just reframing it, and then immediately started hiring fewer diverse candidates. It's like saying, "I'm not breaking up with you. I'm just seeing other people and never calling you again." The employee quotes, "Tell the real story. It seems to have stalled due to budgetary concerns and possibly due to the political environment. I would prefer that it have been maintained, if not expanded. Day was valuable, and I'm very disappointed that it has been eliminated. We are worse off as a company and our place in society since dropping the day policy. I thought day created a safe space for us all. It allowed us to feel represented. The company removed them with no notice and did not provide any mention of it or reasoning." Now, I know what you're rethinking, but surely the stock market rewarded these brave companies for standing up to woke culture. Let's check the receipts. Target experienced a 12% drop in stock value in late 2024, following widespread criticism of its day strategies and product initiatives, down 12%. Ouch. Disney, February 2025. Following reports of potential day cuts, Disney's stock rose to $117.20, signaling investor approval. March 2025, after Disney formally confirmed the removal of certain day programs. Shares stabilized at $115.80, suggesting mixed reactions. So a tiny bump then? Nothing. All that political theater for $1.40 per share. Ford, the automaker, reported $40.7 billion in Q1 revenue, a 5% drop from the same quarter last year. Net income plummeted 64% to just $471 million, and adjusted EBIT fell to $1 billion, down from $2.8 billion a year prior. Net income down 64%. But hey, at least they're not doing day anymore, so that's something. McDonald's Q1 2025 revenue fell 3% to $5.96 billion. U.S. comparable sales dropped 3.6% due to declining guest counts. The fast food giant's diluted earnings per share dropped 2% to $2.60. Declining guest counts, that's McDonald's speak for people, stopped coming. And here's the plot twist nobody saw coming. 1 in 3 business leaders say day is being reinstated. Most are doing so quietly. They cut it, faced consequences, and now they're quietly bringing it back, but not publicly, because that would require admitting they made a mistake. And corporations don't admit mistakes, they adjust strategy based on emerging data. The top reason companies reduced or eliminated day initiatives was political pressure, 54%, followed by public scrutiny of day, 42%. They didn't cut day because it didn't work. They cut it because it was politically inconvenient. And now they're bringing it back because, turns out, alienating your workforce and customers is bad for business. Who could have predicted this? Oh, right, everyone. So let's step back and look at what actually happened here, because this isn't really a story about day dying. It's a story about corporate cowardice. Here's the sequence. 2020, George Floyd is murdered. Companies make big day promises. 2022, 2023, companies actually make progress. Diversity increases, metrics improve. 2023, Supreme Court rules on college admissions. Companies panic. 2024, political winds shift. Companies preemptively abandon commitments. 2025, 53% of S&P 100 companies adjust their day messaging. Use of day drops 68%. Day metrics in executive pay cut in half. 2025, companies face backlash, morale drops, hiring diversity declines. 2025, 1 in 3 quietly start reinstating what they cut. It's the fastest corporate flip-flop in modern history. And the excuse? We evaluate and adjust our programs in light of new laws, court decisions, and more recently, executive orders from the new administration. Except the laws didn't actually change. Court decisions were about colleges, not corporations. And executive orders only apply to federal contractors. So who won here? Conservative activists. They got companies to stop saying, day victory lap. Progressive activists, they organized boycotts. Some worked, most didn't. Corporate executives, they actually lost. Despite the heightened scrutiny firms face following day controversies, firms make only modest and largely superficial changes in their hiring. Overall diversity is largely unchanged because the departures of diverse employees also rise. So they pissed off employees, faced boycotts, damaged their brands, and didn't even save money because diverse employees left at higher rates, requiring costly replacement hires. Brilliant strategy, guys. Really top-tier thinking. The real losers? Anonymous employee feedback on Glassdoor indicates that morale among day team members has dropped by 15% since the announcement. Retention rates remain steady, but employees in diversity-related roles report lower job satisfaction. Employees, the people who actually make these companies run. They're watching their employers cave to political pressure and wondering if they'll abandon this. What else will they abandon when it becomes inconvenient? So where does this leave us? Here's my prediction. Based on the data we've seen, the future of day will likely involve companies making more strategic, less public-facing adjustments. Some may continue diversity efforts under different branding, while others wait for the political climate to shift before reinvesting in day. Translation: day isn't dead. It's just gone underground. Companies will keep doing the work because it turns out diverse teams actually are more innovative. Diverse talent pools actually do attract better candidates, And inclusive workplaces actually do have higher retention. They'll just stop calling it DAY, they'll call it talent optimization, workforce excellence, human capital strategy. Inclusive meritocracy, yes. That's a real term being used now, I think, that companies remain focused on building these inclusive, high-performing workplaces. It has nothing to do with politics. It's how they find and keep the best talent, and they're going to continue to do that. They're focused on meritocracy. See, same goals, different marketing. And here, SYTHEYLL have two. Gen Z and millennial job seekers consistently rank DAY as a top factor in job decisions. The workers' companies want to hire care about this stuff. So companies will keep doing it. They'll just be quieter about it. But here's what makes me cynical about all this. If your commitment to diversity evaporates the moment it becomes politically inconvenient, was it ever really a commitment? Or was it just good marketing? 3 in 4 admit their company's DEI approach is driven by the bottom line. There's your answer. It was never about values. It was about value. $signs. So the next time a company tells you they recommitted to diversity or building an inclusive workplace or any other corporate buzzword salad, remember 2025, remember the year half the S&P 100 proved that their commitments were written in erasable ink. Remember that 68% drop in day mentions, that 53% of companies quietly changing their tune, that 33% drop in hiring diverse candidates after these programs were cut. The data doesn't lie, even when the press releases do. DAY isn't dead. It's just learned to hide. And that might actually be worse. Look, I don't care what your political views are on DAY, progressive, conservative, somewhere in the middle. Doesn't matter for this story. What matters is this. We just watched corporate America make the fastest retreat from publicly stated values in modern history. Not because those values were wrong, not because the programs didn't work, but because they became politically inconvenient, and they did it while lying about it. We're not abandoning DEI, just reframing it. Meanwhile, 57% report hiring fewer underrepresented workers after the cuts. These are publicly traded companies. They file their numbers with the SEC. We can see what they're doing. And what they're doing doesn't match what they're saying. So the next time you hear a CEO talk about their company's commitment to anything diversity, sustainability, employee well-being, whatever, ask yourself, will that commitment survive the first political headwind? Because in 2025, we learned the answer, and it's not encouraging. See you in the next one.